Howdy-ho from Creative Writing Corner. I'm Luke J. Morris, and today we are talking about how to write characters of differing backgrounds and economic status, known in modern parlance as social classes, or just classes of people. It's not really polite to classify people, but we do it anyway, and it's part of how we identify, so we're going to be doing that as writers. You might as well get used to it. One of the biggest challenges we as authors face is making our characters unique individuals. A compelling character is, among other things, someone the audience can identify or can easily distinguish from other characters in his or her world. Novice authors and even many professionals struggle with making each of their significant characters look, sound, and act in a way that sets them apart from other characters their readers will encounter. I'm sure you've seen movies, read books, or plays, or comics where every character, they may look different, but they all sound the same. They all act the same. They all seem like they came from the same place. They all seem like the same character, maybe with different ages, genders, and clothing styles, but that's it. So we need to set them apart. A group of characters that dress, talk, and act in a similar manner will soon become boring and monotonous. The moment you put the book down or turn the TV off, it's hard to remember which character was which makes you disinclined to pick the book back up or turn the TV back on. It makes you very inclined to change the channel. We need to differentiate our characters from each other and from other characters that people see in media on a regular basis. So one way we do this is by giving them varied social and economic backgrounds and showing those differences to the audience via the use of what Saul Stein calls markers. Character markers. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Okay, so our lesson today comes from Saul Stein. He is the author of Stein on Writing, and he's a master editor. So using markers to quickly characterize your characters. Why should we listen to Saul Stein? Well, he's written these books here, 13 books including 9 novels. He's a publisher and editor-in-chief of his own publishing company. He's a successful playwright, co-founded his own playwrights group. He's edited some of the great writers of the 20th century, including Bertrand Wolfe, one of my personal favorites, George Orwell, Sidney Hook, another one of my personal favorites, James Baldwin, and Elia Kazan, both a writer and a filmmaker there. He's an honorary life member of the International Brotherhood of Magicians. May not affect writing that much, but true story, you might as well know. Characters make your story. If your characters come alive, what they do becomes the story. So where do your characters come from? Many dramatic moments in theater and film come from clashes between characters based on differences in background. Cultural differences arise from inherited characteristics, upbringing, and individual temperament. Characters of different cultural classes caught in a crucible are ideal for fiction. This idea of the crucible, Stein goes into it in depth. I haven't talked about it much on my channel yet, but just understand the crucible is like a melting pot. It's a place where characters are put that they cannot escape, and they must come into conflict with each other. In order to get out of the crucible, they must solve the issue that they are in the crucible with. That conflict and that inability to escape the conflict is what creates tension in fiction. So the point is, each of your major characters could come from his or her own world, distinct from those of the other major characters. This creates interesting character interactions with others, as well as huge opportunities for character growth. The process of identifying different worlds for the readers can be accomplished quickly through markers, easily identified signals that to the majority of readers will reveal a character's cultural and social background. So when we talk about markers, we're not talking about a big sign that says, I am poor, or I am rich, or the letter D for douchebag on someone's head. We're going to be a little bit more subtle than that. The purpose of markers. When in fiction, theater, and film, the writer brings together people of differing social and cultural backgrounds, he needs to step back and watch the inherent drama of differences explode. If you haven't seen cultural clashes between people of different classes, you have not been watching the news in the last 100 years. Differences assume opposition. That's what makes writing dramatic. If everyone's the same, there's no opposition and there's no conflict, so there's no drama. Smart writers use markers as a shortcut to lay out these differences for the readers, setting up the conflict and thus the story to come. While no marker is an absolute designation of background or class, there are exceptions to almost all of them, the reader will feel a reaction to the markers based on his or her preconceptions. Preconceptions also might mean how that person stereotypes, whatever prejudices that person brings to it, but not necessarily in a negative way. It's just something that we all have a common idea of what somebody in poverty looks, sounds, and acts like, what somebody who's higher class, wealthy, looks, sounds, and acts like, and what somebody who's in between looks, sounds, and acts like. They're not always accurate, but we still have those ideas. So the types of markers, there's clothing, there's hairstyle, there's fingernails, jewelry and makeup, mannerisms, transportation, food, drink, and the places where they eat, manners and breeding or the lack thereof, and character dialogue. All of these things can tell us something about who a character is. Clothing is a big one because that's oftentimes one of the first things we'll see about a character, clothing and hairstyle. We might see the character's fingernails if we get a close-up or if you decide to describe them. And a person with a whole bunch of dirt under his fingernails and calluses on the end of his fingers is probably somebody in the working class or the lower classes, and somebody whose fingers are very nicely manicured with diamond studs in them is almost certainly upper class, or at least wants to be. Jewelry and makeup or the lack thereof, mannerisms and habits, what kind of vehicles they drive or take to work, whether they go to work at all, where they eat food and drink and what kind of food and drink they eat. If they're eating ramen noodles at home, they're obviously in a different social class, or probably in a different social class than if they are eating filet mignon down at the expensive French restaurant. If they have manners and breeding, or they don't have those also tell us a lot. And of course, the way they talk. Character dialogue doesn't just mean what they say, but how they say it. All of your characters should speak differently. And part of what helps you create that different pattern of speech is imagining or picturing your characters in different social classes, coming from different backgrounds. You've probably talked to somebody who is poor, homeless. You've probably talked to plenty of people in between there. It's more of a spectrum than a three-step scale. Use that dialogue and the particular manners of speech, particular figurative idioms, things like that, to tell us something about the characters. So this character right here, what markers show for her, and what do they tell us? You guys, if you've done some reading, seen movies recently, you probably recognize this character, not the actress herself, but the character as Daisy from The Great Gatsby. So if you can take a look at the markers here, from her hairstyle to her makeup, to the little beret she has in her hair, to the nice taffeta dress she's got on here, she is probably of the upper classes. Having read this book, I know for a fact she's of the upper classes, but we can say that without even knowing who she is. We have an idea that she's probably reasonably wealthy, especially given the time period that the piece is set in. So how do we identify markers? Let's try that. Let's practice that. The next few slides, we're going to show pictures of characters that you probably recognize and dialogue that those characters speak. So you can answer these following questions. What markers can you name for this character? What do those markers tell us about who that character is, who they are as a person on the inside? How might the author use those markers to build conflict or other elements of interest in the story? That's the most important part. How does this class difference serve the story? So we see our gentleman here sitting on a bench, smoking a pipe in the garden. Sorry, I don't want any adventures. Thank you, not today. Good morning. But please come to tea anytime you like. Why not tomorrow? Goodbye. Bother burgling and everything to do with it. I wish I was at home in my nice hole by the fire with the kettle just beginning to sing. Now I know what a piece of bacon feels like when it is suddenly picked out of the pan with a fork and put back on the shelf. Trouble reciting that because it kind of went off the screen, but you get the idea. This, of course, is Bilbo Baggins from The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings. And he has a nice vest on, nice shirt and vest, and he's sitting in what we can probably imagine is his garden, very nice outdoor place, smoking a pipe with his diction here and the way he puts things, talking about coming to tea and sitting in a nice hole by the fire. A hole might seem lower class, but given what we know about it, if you guys have read the book or seen the movie, it's a pretty nice haul. He's upper middle class at least, if not upper class. Another character here. Boy, oh boy, these just disappear, don't they? Supernatural occurrences. This is Giles. The influx of the undead, the supernatural occurrences, it's been building for years. There's a reason why you're here and a reason why it's now. Buffy says, because now is the time my mom moved here. Giles, something's coming. Something is going to happen here soon. Imagine that with a British accent. I'm not going to do my horrible British accent for you. Buffy, gee, can you vague that up for me? So we get the idea here that Giles might be an older British mentor figure. Buffy is younger and, a little bit of a valley girl. Willow, well, when I'm with a boy I like, it's hard for me to say anything cool or witty or at all. I can usually make a few vowel sounds and then I have to go away. Buffy, it's not that bad. No, it is. I think boys are more interested in a girl who can talk. Buffy, you really haven't been dating lately. So we have a confluence of equals here. They're not the same. Willow is more nervous. We can tell that by the way she speaks. Buffy is more confident. But otherwise, they're pretty much on the same level. From their speech, we can tell they've got the same educational background. Buffy, if the apocalypse comes, beat me. That really dates both her and me because I know exactly what that means. The younger generations don't. Once upon a time, there was a thing called a pager. Prior to the modern era cell phone, no, you could not get internet on it. All you could do was send your phone number to someone, have them find a phone to attach to a cord, attached to a wall, and dial the number into that phone to call someone back, usually with change. God, I'm so old. And then we have these characters. Did you give Nick a little heart-to-heart talk on the veranda? Demanded Tom suddenly. Did I? She looked at me. I can't seem to remember, but I think we talked about the Nordic race. Yes, I'm sure we did. It sort of crept up on us, and the first thing you know... Don't believe everything you hear, Nick, he advised me. Self-control, repeated Tom incredulously. By the way, this is from Chapter 1, this is from Chapter 7, near the climax of the book. I suppose the latest thing is to sit back and let Mr. Nobody from Nowhere make love to your wife. Well, if that's the idea, you can count me out. Nowadays, people begin by sneering at family life and family institutions, and next they'll throw everything overboard and have intermarriage between black and white. Gasp. Who would do such a thing? So obviously from here we can tell that Tom is upper class and very aware of it, snooty, and of course racist. So Tom is not our good guy here. Tom Buchanan, this is once again The Great Gatsby. What else might be a marker beyond everything we just listed? Per Saul Stein, I have a strong preference for action markers. That is, sentences that describe what a character does and at the same time reveal something about the character's upbringing or background. Every time Zelda ate in a restaurant, she found some reason to send food back to the kitchen. Lewis always played it safe by over-tipping the waiter. As usual, Angelica let her food get cold because she was busy watching everyone else in the restaurant. So each one of these things tells us something, the way they act. So Zelda, probably pretty prissy, pretty in touch with herself, and also likes to complain. Lewis, playing it safe, over-tipping the waiter, so apparently he does not want to be thought less of for some reason or other. Angelica watches everyone else in the restaurant. She might be fascinated by people. These tell us different things about people. We've just seen three quite different instant characterizations in the same location, a restaurant. We know things about these people now. Even a character doing nothing should be doing something. Each of these characters is doing nothing in a different way, and that tells us something about him. This goes beyond just social classes to identifying characteristics. So how do you make markers for your characters? When you're creating a character, try to answer these questions. What trait inherited by the protagonist has most influenced his adult life? What custom of the protagonist's family still haunts his life? Which personal habit has he tried to break unsuccessfully for years? What family tradition has had the most positive influence on the protagonist? What is the single most important factor in the villain's upbringing that contributed to his reprehensible conduct? These are things to think about when you're creating your characters, backgrounds, fundamental class distinctions. So we've got a couple of different characters here. This is just a stock photo from somewhere. But you can see that these characters, even though they're all boys, probably in London, given the clothing styles, probably back in the mid-20th century, given the hairstyles and clothing styles and everything else, they're obviously of different social classes. You've got these kids here in suits and top hats with canes. And you've got these kids here in normal schoolboy clothes, with knickers and jackets and just untucked shirts, and definitely probably middle-class kids here, upper crust. That tells us a lot about them. Also, the way they're looking. This kid looking at these kids over here, these guys think they're too important, too high and mighty to talk to these kids. These kids think these guys are just funny. So how do you make markers for your characters? If you're presently writing a novel, have you examined it to see if there are some social or class differences between your two most important characters? How do those differences influence your story? If you've neglected such differences, how might you bolster your story or make it stronger by adding some social and cultural differences that arouse emotion? How can you put your characters in different classes? That gives them different status and a different way to relate to each other. Social classes. Obviously, social classes are just arbitrary distinctions that we throw on people because we like to classify things as humans. There's actually a complete spectrum from homeless and broke to, well, this right here. They're not just three different social classes, and you can identify everything by these three. But we like things in threes, from Plato's eternal triangle to Aristotle's three-act structure. All of these things, we as humans like things in threes, so we've divided class up into three general groupings. This is a good starting point, but remember, there is a spectrum here, and you can work with that. Not every poor character has to be this poor. Not every rich character has to be this kind of douchebag rich. Not every middle-class character is a soccer mom, housewife, and businessman dad. Like, there are other ways to go about this, but this is just an idea to start you on differentiating your characters. Characterization exercise using markers. So here's what we're going to do. Choose two major characters from the last story you wrote. Look at the list of markers we've covered so far. List three specific markers for each character that might be used to characterize him or her and create conflict between those characters. Then you're going to write a short scene introducing those characters and their conflict using markers to define it. You guys think you can do that? That is your homework. Choose your two characters, pick some markers for them, and then throw them together and see how they interact. That'll be all for now. Thanks for tuning in, my friends. Good luck writing your scenes and differentiating your characters. If you'd like to share your thoughts or takeaways on this lesson, please leave a comment below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel, and check out the rest of my videos for more writing ideas and inspiration. Right on.